Hey everyone, this is Eran from SternFX, and in this tutorial I want to show you a little bit of behind the scenes of how I've created the new trailer for the Boris TV show. The brief here was very loose. They only asked me to use the new BCC8, the Boris Continuum Complete 8, in order to create something exciting. Hopefully this is what I came up with. So this is the final piece, of course, and now it's time to take you behind the scenes and show you a little bit about the thought process or the thinking process and how I managed to create all those fancy graphics. Now, the basic idea is, first of all, try to tell some kind of a story. So I thought that the story should be very simple. We will throw something up in the air, and then it will land and create the final logo. So this is what I came up with on a basic, very basic animation. We will throw this screen, and then we will throw the logo in an opposite angle, and then something will happen, and at the end they will land one on top of the other. And of course we will design a screen with graphics here, which will literally be the TV graphics with all the glory that you saw before. But first thing was just to make sure that the animation, the basic animation, the throw and the landing will behave as realistic as possible. So I just want to show you that for the screen here, we've got a couple of keyframes just for the transformations here, and I will elaborate in a moment what we are seeing here. But just for the position and the rotation, which actually throws the screen up in the air and then make it fall and tumble a little bit. And same thing for the Boris title, but a little bit delayed in time. So we'll have some kind of a cascade animation. So this is the basic principle, and this is something that you have to deal at a very early stage. And then of course I created the basic camera move. For that, I think that I will change the viewer here from my active camera to maybe let's start with custom view 1, just in order to get a sense of what we have here. Maybe custom view 1 is not the best angle, so let's try custom view 2. I think this will give us much more of a overall idea. And if just for one moment we will change our viewer from adaptive resolution to wireframe, now you can select the camera and just press space bar in order to see the camera movement. And of course we can look at it from different angles. So this is from custom view 1, so you can see what the camera is actually doing. It's a very simple move. At the end we have a crush zoom into our text, into the whole scene. But this is basically what the camera is doing. And of course all the keyframes are here under the null. This orbit null, the 3D null here, is controlling the camera, and this is very simple and basic camera animation move inside After Effects. If I'm going to scrub it, then the screen is moving up, and then the logo is moving after it. Camera is pulling away from the scene, and then we can see that they are both landing one on top of the other. And of course this is a little bit of a cheat because we don't have a 3D unified interface inside After Effects. We have to actually stack the layer like in a 2D mode. Although the Boris layers will obey the camera and the light, at the final scene it's not a full 3D scene. So we have to cheat a little bit until we get something which looks kind of decent from the main camera angle. Okay, so now that we know where are we taking it in terms of the story, we can actually concentrate in the design and all the beauty things and make it look as believable as we can. So I will show you what I did here. First of all, I will isolate the wall layer. And this is basically just a simple layer deformer on a regular solid with a texture, a front texture of this metallic diamond plate. Now we can see that the opacity here is very low. If I will raise it to 100%, we can see actually the texture in its full glory. But due to the fact that this should be a background element, I took a couple of steps. First, of course, I lowered the opacity to 25%. And then I also changed the scale of the bump. So let me just raise it a little bit, and I will show you this is how you will get it initially. So probably most of the textures will not look as good as they can be when they are just stretched across the whole surface. So a wise thing to do is just change the scale until you get the pattern that you are after. And then of course you can lower the opacity and change the material. But before doing so, I just want to show you that I also used here the bend and taper twist and just modified a little bit. Once again, if I'm going to change here to maybe custom view 3, so we can see that we have some kind of a 3D geometric shape just around everything. And because it is bending and deforming, it kind of look interesting from the camera angle and the camera point of view. And when we are moving the camera, it catches lights and reflection in a very interesting way. But once again, I have to remind you that this is a background element, so we have to lower its opacity just in order for it not to steal the attention. Now, obviously, I also added a floor here. So this is using the BCC Extruded Spline, and I choose to use the path type here, which you can of course choose from different kinds. I choose the oval path, and just to show you what we have here, I will try to get a better angle, maybe zoom out a little bit further away from the scene, and we can see that this is our floor. Now the screen and the Boris element at this point are just on top of it, but if we will go to the start of the animation, we can see actually that there are just lying beneath our floor. So this is what I told you about. You have to cheat a little bit, but this is their starting point, and from this point they will shoot up in the air. Now I'm going to switch once again back to my active camera so we can see how the camera is viewing the scene, and we will move forward a little bit so we can see that the screen is the first element that shoots up. And as soon as it shoots up, I want to create the feeling that something is maybe punching a hole or creating some kind of explosion all over the place. Now, of course, I can use the explosion or the shatter effect here underneath my floor, but this will tear the whole floor up. At this opportunity, you can also see that I've used the Gaussian blur here on the floor itself, and I've used it only on the alpha channel, which actually create a nice mix between the wall and the floor. See how it only blurs the alpha of the layer here. And if I will going to change it to its default mode, you can see that it actually blurred the whole thing. Or you can of course blur only the RGB, but in this case I choose just to blur the alpha. So we'll have some kind of a depth or sense of the materials are actually integrating one with each other. So this is just another touch to the floor. But as I said before, I wanted some kind of reaction from the floor, and I didn't want to use the deformer of the shutter here because I needed the floor to be still visible here underneath our screen and also to catch those lights and shadows. So what I've actually did is duplicated the floor and reduced its size and created two explosions. This is the large explosion and the other one is a smaller one. So if we're going to just return one frame before the explosion is actually happening and maybe just extend the layer a little bit, we can see that what we have here And once again, I will turn off the layers that are not important now. Just so we can see, we will once again switch views to custom view 1, and you can see, or maybe custom view 2 will give us a little bit more idea of what we have here. So we can see that this is what the camera is actually seeing, and there's another plate here which actually going to use the shutter effect and a little bit of a film glow in order to shatter everything to pieces. Now I'm not going to go and tell you everything that I did here under the shutter deformer, because actually it doesn't really matter. I just play with the settings until I find something that looks good. What I will mention is that I usually use the time mode in a manual factor, which means that if I'm going to press U, you can see that I can control the amount and the timing of the shutter. So I can tell the layer when to shutter, and then physics will take place and gravity will take place, and all the other settings of the velocity and the variation will make the pieces and the cracks blow away. And of course, this is once again a 3D effect, so it will respond to our camera movement and also to the lights. Since most of the new BCC effects are 32 bits effect, or 32 bits per channel, I should say, if I'm going to look at it from the active camera and then press Alt and raise the project to 32 bits per channel, you can see the beauty of it and how the film glow effect, which is a new effect, really contribute to the feeling of this nice shattering move here. Now, of course, we don't need to see it before it actually happens. So you just have to time the layer so it won't appear before its time. So this is once again a very easy task. You have to just make sure that you just close it or change the in point, so pieces will only fly when the screen is actually leaving the screen here or just moving away from us. So this is what I'm trying to show you. As soon as this screen is here at the middle of the frame, we are actually seeing the result of what the path of it will do to our surface. And then just in order to make it a little bit more convincing, I also added a small explosion, which is same thing. I duplicated this layer and just changed the cracks a little bit to be smaller and time them to a different point of time. So we'll have like a secondary action after the big explosion is happening. And this is just to create a little bit more of a drama. And once again, everything will respond to the camera and the light. So as soon as those Boris letters and screen are leaving the screen or are shooting away from us, we still have something very interesting to look at. And this is actually the result of the shutter effect here. Now, just for the sake of speed, I will lower the project to 8-bit per channel. So everything will be a little bit more snappier when I'm demonstrating this. And let's move to the point here around 3 seconds where everything is more or less starting to settle in place. So the aim here was to create some kind of a screen where the Boris text actually looks like it is sitting on it. Now, of course, I have two lights here which are affecting everything. So each time I'm using the Extruded Text or the Extruded Spline, I made sure that we will use the comp lights and we will use the comp camera. So this is the same for every instance or every plugins from the 3D Objects family. And just to let you know, those plugins are over here under BCC 3D Objects. So we've got plenty of options to choose from depending on what you want to deliver. So let's talk a little bit about the screen here. I will choose it because here at this instance, I just wanted to define maybe a different profile for the bevels. In this case, since I wanted a little bit of extra design, What I've actually choose is for the front bevel to use the concave, which is part of the built-in styles here. And of course you have a couple of more to choose from. And for the back bevel, I use the host path option. And this is just the basic mask which I drew here. So if I'm going to press M, you can see that I have just a mask here. And I can define that the After Effects mask is actually going to be used as a custom bevel to this screen. Now, in order to make the screen semi-transparent, I choose two different materials count. One for the front and the back, and the other for the bevel and sides. For the front and back material, I've used the custom texture layer, which just have to be something that present in your composition. So this is my screen content. And as soon as I'll choose it, we can see that we can define what layer will be given to this texture. And for the side, I just changed the diffuse color to light green just to match to the whole atmosphere, and also give it a little bit of a metallic gold combination, I guess, which is coming as part of the plugin. So you have a lot of materials to choose from, just something that will be a little bit more interesting. And of course, you can also add reflections and other interesting stuff. So what I really love is this ability that you have to customize your object. And actually, if you put a little bit of effort, you can come up with a very interesting and convincing look. So let's speak a little bit about the screen content that we have here for the front texture layer. I'm going to double click on this composition just in order to open it in its own composition panel. And quickly, I'm going to show you the ingredients that we have. So you've guessed it, at the top here, we have another extruded text. This time it's the TV. And the only thing that we have here, which is a little bit interesting, is just the way that I animated these letters. And what I mean is that if I'm just going to solo this layer and create a RAM preview, you will see that no matter how the text is rotating, we can always read the TV letters. So they are not mirroring themselves, which will create something a little bit awkward like VT. To achieve this is actually very simple. I will disable the expression for a moment and just show you that we have two keyframes here. One starting from 90 degrees, and then it travels all the way until minus 90 degrees. So from plus 90 to minus 90. But I'm not going to allow it to continue. As I said, if I will do it, we will actually end up with this VT, which is not so much of a meaningful thing to what we want to say. And since we are starting from this angle and ending also on a vertical minus 90 degrees angle, we can actually loop these keyframes. So I just wrote down a simple expression, loop out, cycle, this is the mode, which actually just cycle those keyframes all the time until the end of this timeline. So if I found out that this animation is a little bit slower or faster, I can just change the speed of the keyframe and just test it once again and see. Now it looks like a seamless animation, although there is a minor jump, but you can hardly spot it. And the end result is that we always be able to read the TV word here. So this is just nice trick that I wanted to share with you. Now let's go from the bottom up and just analyze what we have here. Here we have the Boris film grain effect, which is a very nice and fast self-animating grain effect, which of course you can choose different amount and different variation. After that, we have the wonderful damaged TV effect, which also add a little bit of flickering and feel of analoguing, ghosting and noise and other lines and interference that we always love to add to our composition. So this, I guess, will sell the idea that this is actually screen on something. And just in order to get the transparency to show up at the final composition. So if I'm going to leave it like this and just return here, we can see that this is actually blocks all the information that we have underneath. And I really wanted the feel of a semi-transparent screen. So for that, we need to generate an alpha channel. So what I did here is actually use the simple set channel effect and just change the alpha here will be taken from the luminance channel. So now we can see that we have some kind of a transparency to work with. And this transparency combined as a texture in our main composition will give us the feel of a semi-transparent object, and we can see through it. So this is just a little touch that I've added here. Now on top of it, I have here, and this is also very interesting, the bars, and we've got two instances of the bars, and I just want to isolate it once again, just in order to show you how I created this. So a couple of plugins here. Let's just work our way from the first one to the last one. So this is the famous Beat Reactor. Actually, this is a utility plugin. The purpose of it is to analyze an audio file and then generate keyframes so you can marry your animation to some kind of a waveform. But I found this very useful as a graphic element, and also it will demonstrate the variation and the tools that you have with Boris Continuum Complete. So what I actually did is just placed some kind of MP3 music track here. It doesn't really matter, it's just something that I found. And then you can see the peaks of it. You can see this effect is actually creating this nice equalizer. As I told you, I didn't really want to analyze this. I just want to use this as a graphic element. So after this plugin, I added the rectangular wipe, and this is just to crop the areas that I wanted. Of course, the layer here is rotated 180 degrees. So usually it doesn't really present itself this way. So we have two wipes, one to actually wipe the left side and the other one to wipe the right side. And then I just want to colorize it. So I added the tritone effect, just not to overwhelm the design and to recolorize it. And then I've added the Scanline effect and changing the size and the softness and the angle. I just want to break those little EQ to different rows so we'll have a better graphic representation. And then I needed the transparency, so I have to once again create an alpha channel using the same trick. So I set the channels. So once again, we'll have a transparent object. I did two instances, so I duplicated one here and one there. And I placed those bars just relative to my text, which was already rotating in the screen. And then I wanted to maybe add a few more elements just to dress it a little bit more interesting. Let me show you what I did. Let's start with the particle array. And this is a very sophisticated effect. I'm not going to cover it here. It is a very impressive effect. However, I want to show you something that I did here. So this effect is applied to a regular solid layer. It will create its own alpha channel, so we don't have to worry about it. But I did want to take this effect and place it here at the corner of the screen. Now, of course, I can take the whole layer, but sometimes you can't just move the whole layer. I just want to show you what the problem is. If we will take the center here and move it around, because this effect is 3D aware, it will actually change the perspective of those little sphere and just create something which, to my opinion, doesn't look right, at least for this instance. So one way to work around it is just to apply a basic Boris CC DVE effect and just use its position to move it to wherever you want on the screen. And this is without moving the layer. So if you want to duplicate a couple of them or whatever, if you just can't move the whole layer, this is one way to go. And on top of it, I just added a nice glow. As always, if you have any doubt, add more glow. Okay, so this is what we have so far. We have our background, 2 bars, swiveling text, and a nice element of particles. I felt that this is not enough, so I wanted to maybe introduce a little bit of a video thing here, and these are the scopes. Now the scopes are brand new to version 8, and once again I wanted to show that we have this as a filter and use it in some kind of an artistic fashion and not as it meant to be. And the meaning of this effect is actually to use it as a helper once again. So double click on this scope layer and we can see here that I've placed this Videoscope on an adjustment layer, and this Videoscope is actually measuring what happens below. And what happened below is another new effect, and this one called organic strands. This is once again something which is very, very sophisticated. We don't have enough time to cover it, maybe on another tutorial. And just underneath there's the famous Boris clouds, and I took the liberty to change the colors and to create some kind of a maybe a little bit of an aggressive animation, just in order for the scopes to move all over the place. So this is once again a very useful utility or very useful plugin to this package. Now, as I mentioned, I wanted to show it off. I just wanted to see them present in the composition. So I placed this composition here in the screen content and just duplicated and just masked out only the scopes. So we'll have some kind of a moving scope just underneath the text element. And this concludes the screen content. So coming back to our main composition, I once again will select the screen itself and just show you that by using under the front and back material a texture layer, we can define that this will be the texture that will live inside here. And of course we can change the opacity. We can choose how to interpolate the alpha channel. And this is things that you have to play until you are satisfied, until you got the correct result. So now that the basic animation is in place and we also have our content and our 2 explosion, it's time to add a little bit more of a realism to the shot. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to show you that we have a screen reflection here, which is basically the same layer just turned upside down. This will create the reflection of the screen and will give it a little bit more of depth. And just in order to sell it a little bit better, I also added a shadow just underneath it. And this is once again a little touch because we have to get some kind of a contact shadow, because we cannot use the After Effects light in order to cast shadows. We have to cheat a little bit here. So I did it with a basic shape layer, just changing the position, scale, and a little bit of opacity in order to create a fake shadow, which I think will contribute to the whole look. And then of course, because I didn't want to be exceptional, I just added, like everyone else these days, a lens flare. Now this is once again a newly designed 3D lens flare, which will of course behave in real 3D space, and you've got a lot of options to choose from. Now I like my flares very subtle, very companion to the shot and not in your face. So you can see that there is some kind of a flare, but if you want, you can maybe turn more things here and just get a sense of where the flare is in the scene. And you can see that this tracks to the 3D movement of everything very, very conveniently. So you get the chance to design what you want to include or exclude. I'm just going to turn off most of what I have here already and just going to leave the stripes on. And of course, under each one of these, you have many parameters to choose from. So this is once again very subtle, but I think it will contribute to the whole atmosphere. And then once everything is in place, I raise it back to 32 bits per channel and created a RAM preview. Now at this point it looks like the screen may need a little bit more attention, so I duplicate the screen layer and I've added a BCC glow to it. And in order for the glow to flicker a little bit, I use a very simple wiggle expression on the opacity of the whole layer, and of course change the blending mode here to lighten. So this will vary the glow over time and makes it a little bit more of a TV style, a flickering TV screen. And to my eyes, it looks a little bit more convincing. Then in order to make everything work a little bit better together in terms of compositing, I've added an adjustment layer. And to this adjustment layer, I just created a basic mask which moves. So it has two keyframes for the mask path. I added the fast blur effect just in order to create a faux depth of field. So the background will be a little bit out of focus and will have a little bit more definition here in the middle of the screen. Now, of course, in order to sell it, we have to enable motion blur to all those pieces and things that are flying all over the place. Now, it can be tedious to go one layer at a time and open up the render settings and hunt for the motion blur effect. You can see that we can enable motion blur to all those instances of the 3D effect, the 3D object that we used. So instead of going one by one, my advice is to select the timeline, press Ctrl or Command Shift A, which will deselect all the layers, make sure that nothing is selected, and just write down motion blur. And this will open up all the places where the motion blur words are appearing in the timeline, so we can just quickly turn everything on. And I have to warn you that by turning this on, you really get a very, very convincing effect, but it does take a lot of time to render. So you can see that my render times are a little bit more slow now. Another advice is also to control the render quality. So now here under render, we can see that we've got a better anti-aliasing, and what's more important, we've got a high motion blur smoothness. And I really recommend to go with the highest settings here before you are rendering your final. So once again, I'm going to select this, make sure that nothing is selected by pressing F2 or Command Shift A, and then just search for the MB smooth, or just MBSM should be enough. And just make sure that all my layers here, or most of the layers, are set to the highest quality possible. So some of them are already set to the highest place, to the highest setting. Actually, the floor and the wall doesn't really need to be in their highest settings because there is not a lot of movement and nothing is actually breaking from those layers. And this is it. Once you have everything in place, you can render the file. And of course, after that, you can also add your own sound effect or sounds like I did here. And this is how I get to this final result. So let's take a look at the final result once more. And now you know how this trailer was constructed. So hopefully these tricks and tips that I showed you were helpful, and now you're ready to create your own exciting trailers as well. Until next time we'll meet in another Boris TV episode or in real life. This is Eran wishing you a very creative and effective day.